Okay, it looks like we are going live. Still have a couple minutes or so before I want to get started. I just wanted to make sure that I was on here and that you all could actually see me. So if you're tuning in, awesome, awesome, awesome. Just so I know that you're out there, if you want to pop into the comments and say hi, let us know where you're from. And this is a question and answer live stream. So if you haven't seen the notifications about that, this is a perfect time for you to pop those questions into the comments because won't be much of a Q&A without the Q. So we'll go ahead and dive in and get started in a minute or two, but just want to give everyone a chance to get on and ask some questions. All right. So anyway, just go ahead and pop on. All right, so it looks like we've got Shanice from Northwest Iowa. We've got Jenner, and we've got Tracy so far. So welcome, welcome. Like I said, I'm gonna just kind of give folks another minute or so since this is a live Q&A. If you've got questions, go ahead and pop them into the comments because definitely want to answer your questions. So anyway, like I said, we'll go ahead and get started in a minute or two. So we've got Brooke on now. So welcome. All right. I know it's 10 o'clock on a Monday morning. I think that seems early now that that a lot of people are at home and don't have to start their days at 6, 7 o'clock in the morning. So again, feel free to ask me anything about journaling, about art, about teaching, whatever you want to kind of ask about. But like I said, go ahead and pop those in the comments so that I can see them, and I'll try to answer them as they come up. But I'm going to go ahead and get started. I've already had a couple people that have asked questions in some of the previous posts from this morning and from last night. So welcome to my latest live stream. I've been trying to do this on a pretty regular basis. So I started out 2 weeks ago doing the live stream journaling, and I'm going to return to that on Wednesday morning. So if you're around Wednesday morning at 10 a.m. Eastern Daylight Time, make sure you tune in. I'll be going back to some of the journaling, so that way you can kind of check that out. But I just kind of felt like this could be sort of a nice transition from kind of that introductory kind of journaling stuff to maybe something a little bit deeper, a little bit more meaningful. So I kind of thought, oh, this would be a good time to kind of answer questions that folks might have. So again, if you've got any questions, please go ahead and pop them into the comments, and I'll go ahead and try to answer as many as I can. So I'm not really sure how long this is going to be. If you all have a lot of questions, then of course it's going to be much longer than something else. So if we have just a few questions, this might be kind of short. So I'm going to go ahead and start with a question that came in a little bit earlier on an early post, and this one is from Tracy Fox, who I believe is tuning in from the UK. So welcome. It's the afternoon there. So anyway, so Tracy asked, do you work in your journal every day? And if yes, what motivates you to do so? I wish I could say that, yes, I work in my journal every single day, but unfortunately I don't always. and it's just life gets in the way. I try to work in it several times a week. And what really kind of is motivating me here recently is doing the live stream. So I think having something that you've scheduled, or something, like when I was a teacher, one of the ways that I kept up with my art was taking classes. And so by teaching classes, that allows me to really dive into the journaling in a much deeper way. So at the beginning of March, I taught a week-long class down in North Carolina at the John C. Campbell Folk School. And that allowed me just to spend 6, 8, 10 hours for 5 days straight, just kind of working in the journal. And then, whenever I'm home, it's a little bit different. There's not as much structure. So I have to kind of create that structure. So for me, doing the live stream tutorials over the last few weeks has really helped kind of get back into the rhythm. Another thing that I do is I try to find things that I can do without a whole lot of fuss and bother. So I love sitting down in my living room watching TV with my wife, and unfortunately that can kind of drain up a lot of time. So what I've been doing is just taking some pens and my journal and doing a lot of simple embellishment, doing some simple embellishments, and maybe just kind of drawing a little bit, doodling a little bit, and something that's kind of mindless that I can watch TV and do at the same time without really needing to focus all my energy onto something that's more conscious. The other thing that I've been doing is I do time-lapse videos every week. So at least I get into the studio and create a 2-page spread that I then, I film it as I'm making it, and I put that out every Friday. So that's one thing that I do. But I think it's kind of just like, having the book handy, I think, is probably the easiest thing. I recently kind of moved my studio space back into my house because my studio's out in my one-car garage, which doesn't have Wi-Fi. And so I wanted to be able to do live streaming, and so I kind of moved part of my studio in here. So it's just having this space now that's always available, and my book is always out now. It's not tucked in my backpack. So when I was a teacher, I'd always take my journal with me to school, and what I would do is a lot of times the book would stay in my backpack, and so that old adage, out of sight, out of mind kind of thing. So I think it's the same thing with a journal. When it's out of sight, I'm not thinking about it, but if it's laying out. So even when I taught, I would have the book out a lot on my desk, and then I could just kind of work in it for 5 minutes here, 10 minutes there. So that's kind of, I wish I could say that I journaled every day and worked in my journal every day. And I know there are people that do that, and that's awesome. I just can never do that. But I think just having the book out, sometimes people are like, oh yeah, but if you have children or if you have animals, things like that, kind of gets in the way. I have lots of cats. I have dogs. So yeah, sometimes the cats get up and knock stuff over, and I can't find my pen because it's underneath the couch because the cats were using it as a toy. But so that's something to kind of just think about, having it out in a space that maybe you pass by every day is an easy way of doing it. And then also, like I said, kind of scheduling a time. Now that so many of us are kind of stuck at home, having some kind of schedule is really, really important, I think, because it's hard to get into that rhythm. Like, our schedules have all been kind of torn apart, and we're at home all the time now. And how do you sort of not just become a lump on the couch? I know some of you are teachers, and you have to do stuff with your schools and with your students, but you don't have that rigidity of going to school every day. And so some of the rituals and some of the schedules that you've had are kind of no longer there. So I think kind of creating some new schedules. So anyway, that's kind of my answer for that one, as far as the journaling every day and maybe finding the motivation to do it. So I hope that kind of answers that question and helps out. So Brooke Richards asks, did you use journals when you taught high school? If so, how did you introduce students to the structure? So Brooke is a high school art teacher down in Georgia, and yes, I used the journals. I got into journaling when I was teaching at the elementary level, and then a couple years later I got transferred to a high school. And when I got transferred, I basically said, hey, I'm going to use the journal with my high school students. And because I think at that time especially, a lot of high school teachers were using sketchbooks. And I think unfortunately a lot of students, myself included, as a high school student, as a college student, don't like traditional sketchbooks because they're very teacher directed. They're kind of boring exercises like, oh, let's draw 3 eggs, draw your hand, draw your shoe, and it's a lot of drawing stuff, and so it's very teacher directed. A lot of times just drawing materials like graphite mainly, maybe some pen and ink, but can be very boring, repetitive, and doesn't really speak to the students and what they're interested in. So when I went in, I said, I'm going to do journaling. And so the way I introduced it was very much the way I did the live stream journaling. Sometimes what I would do, whenever I really got, after years of doing journaling, I started introducing it a different way. I had a lot of my own journals, but then I also would have examples from other people like Leonardo da Vinci, Frida Kahlo and her diaries. I would have, sketchbooks, journals, diaries, a lot of those are published as books. So I would have those as stations, and then I also have my own journal, and kids could rotate and look through and kind of see how different people used the sketchbook, used the journal. But then whenever I would introduce it, I often would just be like, okay, here's watercolor. Here are some things you can do. Now get started. Here's watercolor pencil, and encourage them to build on top of the pages that they worked on. And typically what I would do, 4 quarters, I would have the kids, you needed to have 10 completed or resolved pages by the end of the quarter. And that's kind of how I would assess them. I used to do it like every week, have the kids turn in journals every week. That was just a lot of work on my part, so I just kind of, would spot check it by the time I finished teaching at the high school level. And then at the end of the quarter, they would turn it in, and I would look through it. But it also was a place for them to take notes. So if we were going over a new material or a new project or something like that, then that was a space for them. So it really was kind of a mix between a journal and a sketchbook. And so yeah, they drew in it, they painted, they collaged, they wrote in it, they did personal things in it, but then they did stuff for school, for the class as well. And then they put that in there. And so I would look for that. I would look for that evidence of the notes. Are you engaged in the class, or are you just sitting there, kind of doodling, not paying attention? Not that when you doodle, you're not paying attention, but a lot of students use doodling so they don't have to pay attention. So it looks like they're doing something, but then they're really not. They're not paying attention, because I know that doodling actually helps you remember things. And so if you're doodling with that notion of being able to focus on what somebody's saying, that's much different than just doodling so you can zone out and not pay attention to somebody. Anyway, so that's kind of a little introduction for high school. And Brooke, if you want to know anything more, I'd be happy to share, especially if you want to email or anything like that, or do a chat. I mean, I taught high school for 10 years doing the journaling, so tried a lot of different things with it. So hopefully that kind of helps a little bit with your question. The next question comes from Jenner, and she asks, can you explain differences of matte gel versus matte medium, and when necessary to seal artwork in the journaling? So matte medium and matte gel are very similar. They're both acrylic mediums. Gel medium tends just to be thicker. And a lot of artists use the gel as a glue. I don't use much acrylic in my journals, but I do for standalone art. So artwork that's supposed to hang on the wall, art that is mixed media and acrylic paint based, I use both actually. So the matte gel, the gel medium is, like I said, it's thicker. There's soft gel, there's hard gel, there's medium gel. So most people use the soft gel because it's thick but not super thick. It will kind of flatten out a little bit. It doesn't leave real stiff peaks. And so it's a really good glue. And then some artists will seal their collage materials, because if you're using magazines or newspaper or just papers in general, a lot of it has acid in it. And so over time, that acid kind of eats away at the paper. And I know that David and I have been criticized because in our books, we never talk about the archival quality. And some artists are very concerned, like, oh, I want this journal to last forever. And I really don't care if my journal lasts forever. I mean, it's my journal. Picasso used cardboard, and his sculptures are still around. Robert Rauschenberg created project or artwork that literally is like disintegrating and falling apart. And at the time that he was making it, he wasn't concerned like, oh, I've got to make this so it's going to last forever. That's not the role of the artist. That's the role of the art conservator. And if my books one day end up in a museum somewhere and somebody has to conserve them, that gives them a job. My job is just to document, and I'm not really worried about the matte medium. So the matte medium acts as a sealer and can seal in those things. So I don't, like I said, I don't really use it in my journal, but I use it on art because it's a good sealer on art. And it's something that you really shouldn't use the matte medium or the gel medium or even gloss medium as a final like varnish layer. And even on the bottles, usually it'll say do not use it as a final sealer. You want to use a varnish. You want to use something that's specifically made for that. But yeah, a lot of people do use that in their journals. The other issue is that the matte medium, or even if you're using a glossy medium, so matte just means it's not shiny. But some matte mediums by different companies are kind of shiny, and others by other companies aren't so shiny. The only problem is that acrylic can stick. So if you have acrylic paint on both your pages and you close it together, it really takes a long time for acrylic paint to cure, so it's not sticky. And you may have come across this whenever you've painted your house. So like say you painted some shelves in a bedroom or whatever, you have to wait like a week before you set something on that shelf, and that's latex paint, that's acrylic based paint. So it takes a while for that polymer in there to really harden. So when you push those pages together, they can stick. And I've had issues where all of a sudden you go to pull it apart and it rips because it acts like a glue, and the medium wasn't completely cured. It was dry, and it was dry to the touch, but it wasn't cured. Some artists are like, oh, well, you just put wax paper in it. And other artists are like, oh, well, I put a little bit of cornstarch over it. And I'm kind of like, that's just an extra layer for me. It's just an extra exertion that I don't really need. So for my journals, I use water-based, like watercolor pencil that needs an absorbent surface. So if you use matte medium, gel medium, watercolor can't soak into the paper. You basically seal off the paper. And so some people might be like, oh, well, that'll be good as a final sealer. But again, then you run into that issue that it could be kind of sticky. But everyone has their own working style, and I know a lot of artists that do use acrylics and do use matte medium and gel medium in their journals. I've done it before in the past. I don't do it so much anymore. Every once in a while, maybe a little bit of acrylic paint, but usually not so much with the gel mediums or matte mediums. However, there is an awesome image transfer technique using either matte medium or gel medium. Gel medium is a little bit quicker, and there's a couple of different ways to do it. So if you have never done the image transfer with it, it works pretty well with photocopies, but magazine images. And what you do, there's two ways of doing it. You either build up layers on top of the image, and then you have what's called a skin when you're done, and you rub off all the paper. It's like the tape transfer if you've ever done packing tape transfers. But then the other way you do it is you put the matte medium on your surface, like a painting, and then put the image down into the matte medium, let it dry, and then you rub all the paper off. And then you're just left with the image that's in it. Now that's a backwards kind of thing. So if you've never used gel medium or matte medium to create image transfers, that's really awesome. However, it's a very intensive process, and definitely a studio kind of process, because matte medium, gel medium, that's acrylic based. You need to have a studio where you can wash out your brushes. And I love my journaling process to be portable. And so taking matte medium, gel medium around with me in my backpack to coffee houses and on trips and such isn't that feasible. So it kind of is just an extra process. So anyway, that's just kind of my perspective. Like I said, I don't use it in my journal so much. I use it in art, my art like behind me. And also the matte medium, it's thinner, so it's great for mixing in with your paint to create glazes, to thin down paint, that kind of stuff. So there's a whole lot. You can use it as a glue, but it's really meant to be used in paint, and that's why they were originally created. But artists always find different uses for things. So anyway, so I hope that, Jenner, I hope that helps answer some of that. Like if you do more acrylic based things in your journal, I would just say be careful with the pages sticking together. That's a big kind of pain. And like I said, I've literally had pages that I've had to rip apart because they were stuck. So anyway, hope that helps answer that question. All right, so let's see, I'm just kind of looking through. Okay, so do you seal your watercolors? No, I don't. Not in my journal. So the watercolor just builds up, and the thing is that I usually use a good quality paper. So even in my big everyday journal, it's a sketchbook. It's a Strathmore hardbound sketch journal, and it's got pretty good paper. And I have journals that are 20 years old, and the watercolor doesn't fade, even the cheapest watercolor. Because the great thing is that if you're using, even like I use Prang watercolor, which is a kid's watercolor. It's a school based. A lot of teachers use it for young kids even, and I use that a lot. And the thing is, since the book's closed, it's not exposed to a lot of light, so the watercolor still stays bright and vivid in the pages even 20 years later. Here lately, I've been using the Derwent Inktense travel paint sets, and they are light fast, which means that they're more permanent. So that's something that, like, if you're using a good quality watercolor paint on good quality paper in your journal, it's going to last. In some of my artwork that hangs on the wall, yes, I will seal the watercolor. So if I do a piece on paper, and then a lot of times what I'll do is I'll build a cradle, well, not a frame, but a box that the paper gets glued on, and then I will seal it. But I try to seal it with a varnish, with something that's meant to seal as a final layer, not like I was saying, the acrylic matte mediums, gel mediums are not supposed to be used as a final layer, like a varnish on top of artwork. You can buy varnishes, and I have some spray varnishes and stuff, but sometimes what I'll do is I'll seal it with the gel medium and then seal a varnish on top of it, so that way I can paint on the gel medium and then spray it with a varnish if I need to. So but in my journal, no, I don't seal the watercolors. And when I sell work, a lot of times I'll sell just the paper. I won't frame it, I won't mat it or anything. And basically the idea is I don't seal those because people will take them and get them framed, and they'll be under glass. So traditionally watercolor paintings are matted and framed under glass, and that protects them. So anyway, I don't know if that helps answer that. But anyway, so that's just a little bit. So if you got any more questions, go ahead and pop them up. I do have another one I was kind of saving because it's kind of a deep question, and so let me just pull it up here. Okay, so I have a question from Amy Cerna, which I'm not sure if she's on live right now, but she can. If not, remember, you can always catch the replay of this. So her question was, well, not really a question, but she says, I would like to hear you talk about the decision to leave the classroom and how you are supporting yourself. There's Amy. How you are supporting yourself with those endeavors. I'm interested in doing something similar. So I taught 20 years, and I love teaching. I mean, that's why I'm here. That's why I'm sharing myself. That's why I did the live stream, and will continue doing the live stream over the next few weeks, is that I love teaching. I love interacting with people. I love sharing what I know, but I also love learning from my students. I learned so much from my students. So I always loved teaching. And I taught elementary and I taught high school. I never taught middle school. So if you've ever taught middle school, awesome, bless you. That's just an age group that I never really wanted to work with. But for me, teaching became very tedious, and I wasn't having enough joy with it. And it's sort of like, I don't want a job where I'm miserable. I don't want to be going to driving to work and want to be in a car crash so I don't have to be there. And that's how it became my last year. And it wasn't because of the students, it was because of all the extra stuff. And I think it boils down to the lack of respect and the lack of appreciation. And I think as art educators, a lot of times, we're seen as kind of, oh, you're the babysitter, while the classroom teachers have their planning time, especially at the elementary level. And at the high school level, it's like, oh, well, you're like that fun activity. It's not really a serious class. It's an easy A, and the core classes, the math, the science, the language arts, those are what's really important. And when you kind of get that message from principals, it really makes it difficult to want to go to school. When you really bust your butt to really do something, whether it's a fine arts night or do an after school art club, or you're put in charge of the yearbook and you're not getting paid to do it, that I think you do all that stuff, and then the powers to be don't show you any kind of appreciation. They don't say, hey, awesome, thank you so much for doing that. We know that this is really difficult, and we love how you stepped up and have done these things. And so when you're not respected, and the principals want to do stuff that they would never do to a science teacher or to a classroom teacher, basically give you extra students or split you up so that you're teaching two different groups during the year, whatever. They do some really strange things for the specials, for the fine arts, for things like that. And so it was that, and it was also kind of every year we got another mandate from the supervisors, from the superintendent, and it was like, okay, here's this additional work. It's going to require you to do hours and hours of more work, but we're not going to give you any more time. Actually, we're going to take away some of your planning time so that you could do these collaborative, they called them CLTs, collaborative learning teams, and PLCs, your what was that, professional learning committees or communities or whatever. I've been at it for so long that I'm kind of glad I don't remember all the acronyms, but so when you're tasked with doing more and more but given less time, and then it becomes like, oh, well, you're expected to do it on your own time, and then if you don't get it done, then it's like, oh, it's you're the problem, like you didn't step up to do what you needed to do. And it's sort of like, well, you would never ask a lawyer to be like, what, here, I'm going to give you all this stuff to do, and you only have 6 hours to do it. And if you go over 6 hours, too bad, I'm not going to pay you. But we do that all the time with teachers, that my contract was for 7 hours a day. And it said on there that my day started 10 minutes before the kids got there and 5 minutes after they left. That was my contract. And then there's always a stipulation in there, or as the time that the principal deems necessary or your supervisors deem necessary. So there's this little loophole that, yes, you sign that contract, but it's like, yeah, but whenever your principal wants to have a meeting every day after school, or they expect you to put 40, 50, 60 hours in to make a yearbook that you're not getting paid to do, and they're not giving you any extra time. So that was the other thing, is that I really got to the point where I was wishing that I was going to be in a car accident. And the funny thing is, my wife was a teacher, and that's how we met. And the year that we met, she quit teaching, and she actually left in February because she had a horrible year. And she said the same thing. She said, I was driving to school and I was hoping to be in a car accident so I wouldn't have to go to school, because that would give you a legitimate reason not to go to school that day, and hopefully, maybe even days after that. And I always thought, like, wow, I don't understand that. And then after after 20 years, I understood it. And it just got to the point where I'm like, I can't do this. I mean, I really hated the person I was becoming. I was always angry. I was always frustrated. I was always in a bad mood. I didn't have as much joy in my life. It wasn't joyful to go do that. And so I saved money. My wife and I saved money for a couple years just to have something, just to have a little bit of something. Like, if this doesn't work out, then we've got at least a little bit of money to tide us over for a little bit. I can always go back to teach. And I made sure that I didn't burn any bridges. I didn't like storm out and saying, oh, I'll never be back, but I saved money, and I got out of teaching. I basically resigned in May. It's actually going to be 4 years this year. And I finished up in June. But what was weird is that, I still got a paycheck through August. And, because like most school districts, even though you work for 10 months, they spread your pay over 12 months. And that's what a lot of folks don't understand. Like, oh, you get the summers off and you still get paid. It's like, no, I don't get paid for summer. It's like taking what you do in a year and doing it in 10 months. And then you get 2 months off. So, you end up doing all this work in those 10 months. And so we had enough money saved up, and I figured out, like, for 7 months. So we could survive for 7 months after my August paycheck was in. And then after that, hopefully those 7 months something would kind of happen. And it did. I mean, we never went through all the savings. I mean, we depleted it quite a bit, and our credit cards have gone up. Our credit card debt has gone up. But what has happened is that I've just been able to find some things that it took some time to kind of build up. And even now, like, I'm actually really loving this time now. I mean, I know a lot of people are freaking out about having to stay at home, but when you're a freelance, like, independent artist, independent contractor, most of my time is at home. So I feel like this isn't much different than what I normally do, other than I've really upped my online presence. And so doing things like this and basically having an audience now, because so many of us are stuck at home. So I've actually really been enjoying this, because it gives me a chance to really connect with people that during the school year, especially because a lot of you are teachers, and it's like you're busy doing your teaching stuff. And so now it's like, oh, you have some time, you're at home more, you're not running around so much. A lot of you are still just working your butts off at home trying to figure stuff out, whether you're a teacher or just working from home in general. It's a whole new thing to deal with. But so what I found is what I've really come to believe is that the universe is always conspiring with us. And so if we believe that things aren't going to work out, that things are terrible, and that we have the worst luck, the universe conspires with us to make that a reality. If we believe that things are going to work out, if we believe that the universe is going to provide, that there's enough out there for all of us, then the universe is going to conspire with us. And every time I've been stressed out about oh, I'm not going to have enough money, I need to get more teaching gigs, I need to make something happen, all of a sudden it's like, boom, something comes up, because I've just been having this mindset, like, the universe is conspiring with me. And if I have that positive mind if I have that positive mind set, then the universe is going to conspire with me to create that reality. And that's something that I've really discovered over the last 4 years that I've been out of teaching. And I don't think I ever would have really thought about that. But in looking back at how terrible I felt that those last few years of teaching, the universe was conspiring with me to like create that miserable existence. And it hasn't been easy. I mean, the one thing is the healthcare that I have now, it does not match what I had as a teacher. I mean, that was the one thing. Like, yeah, I miss the salary and I miss the health benefits, because it's, just paying for health insurance is a nightmare. I mean, it takes up a whole lot of the money that my wife and I make. It's amazing how, if you don't have good healthcare, how much it costs just to have, like, not even mediocre health care or health insurance. So anyway, so that was kind of my decision to like get out of teaching, and because of all the just that lack of joy, that anger, that frustration. And oh, my cat, this is Tonks. Here, Tonks, say hi to everyone. So this is Tonks. I was wondering if you were going to come visit us. Anyway, so so what happened was the universe started providing. And what was really interesting, I had gone several months after I quit teaching. I kind of had that summer, like I said, I was still getting a paycheck, and then come August, September especially, it was like, all right, I really need to buckle down. I really need to do some things. And so you just want to help out. Come here. All right. So anyway, he just wants to be held. He's purring. Hi. Yes, thank you. So anyway, so the universe did answer. It was really interesting. I kind of focused on like making some contacts, setting up some workshops. And so I set up a whole bunch of workshops for the spring of that year. And then what happened was, around November or so, I went to see a friend's art exhibit. Actually, it was 3 of my friends were all in an exhibit together. And so I went to their opening, and it was at a local performing arts center here in Purcellville. And I was talking, I was talking to them, and the one, all right, that's enough tongues. The one lady didn't realize that I'd quit teaching, and she knew I was a teacher, but so she's like, oh, you quit teaching. So we were talking about that. Well, a couple weeks later, this lady emailed me and said, hey, our friend Jill, who was actually part of this art exhibit as well, who was a manager of this local art center called the Round Hill Art Center, was looking to leave that and do something else. You're just going to be a pest, aren't you? And so she's like, would you be interested in managing the Round Hill Art Center? I'd taught for them summer camps. And I was like, well, sure. So she hooked me up with the president. It's a nonprofit, so we have a board and we have a president. So she hooked me up with her, and then they hired me as the manager. So that's been 3.5 years now. And so that's a part-time job. And the nice thing is that it's very flexible. So I can travel and I can work from home. I can work from wherever. So much more flexible than a teaching kind of gig. So I have that as a part-time job, and I still have that now. The only problem now is I don't have the classes. So all of a sudden I saw all my workshops and classes for 2-3 months just get canceled. And that was sort of like, okay, now what? But I'm not freaked out about it. I don't know why I'm not. I'm just sort of like, okay, I don't have 2/3 of my income from month to month after this month. And it hasn't really freaked me out yet. And I think it's partly because, like, oh, okay, they have written into the legislation that we're supposed to get, for independent contractors, are supposed to be able to qualify for unemployment. And also millions of other people are worse off than I am. So I'm not trying to compare myself to other people, but it's just sort of like the universe answers, so I think it's gonna work out. And like I said, it's really given me a chance to connect with people online. So anyway, so sorry, I kind of got that. That's why I was kind of saving that question for a little bit later in the conversation, because it's kind of a heavy kind of thing. We have a question from Maddie Jocks. She says, "Do you ever do journal pages you don't share because they're too personal?" No. And the thing is, it's not that I don't do them. It's just that I just share it. Um, Now, I've had this conversation with other people, and my buddy David, if you don't know, he's the second half of the Journal Fodder Junkies. If you know of that, he's the guy that I wrote the 2 books with about visual journals. Anyway, he's had this conversation. We've had this conversation about censoring. Like, I openly and freely share my journals with people. I post about things. I post them online. I let people look through my journals. I don't know. I don't think I purposefully censor myself and try to like not do things that are too personal. But I never feel like, oh, that's too personal. I have to hide that. But I know that there are people that do. I have some friends who have said that they keep a very private journal and don't show it to anybody, and that's perfectly okay. There's nothing that says that you have to share. I mean, I like to share because I think it creates community, it creates connection, and what we go through personally, other people have gone through. And I think a lot of times we feel like when we go through something, maybe that's traumatic or whatever, that we feel like we're alone and we're isolated. And so if somebody's flipping through my journal and they find something that's very personal, they can be like, oh, I felt the same thing. Oh, I went through something similar. And then that creates that kind of connection in that community. And there's but that's just me. That's just, as a teacher, I just have always shared my art. I've always shared myself. And I kind of feel like, even though when I started journaling, I wasn't doing it with my kids. I mean, I was teaching elementary at the time. And at that time, I was like, how am I going to do journaling with little kids? So it wasn't until I got into teaching the high school level that I really started teaching kids about journaling. And so I would just naturally share my journals with them. So I don't feel like there's anything too personal. So I never hide things. If there is something where I'm just like, oh yeah, I don't want somebody to read that. I love ripping up stuff. So, or obscuring it. So if I write something in my journal and I'm like, oh, that's about somebody really particular and they might see this, I don't want them to see this, I'll paint over it to obscure the text but not hide it completely. Or if I write it on a separate piece of paper, if you tear it up and glue it in, or if it's on tracing paper, I love that, tear it up, glue it in backwards, and then that way you can't read it all. But yeah, I haven't done that, but I know sometimes you can, and I've had students at the high school level who have done that. As a high schooler, you're going through all this stuff, and I've had students in the past say, I really was doing some free writing, some stream of consciousness writing, and I wrote something really personal. I don't want anybody to see it. So that's when I tell them, like, you can fold the page, you can paperclip things together. I won't look at it. But as a school project, principals and superintendents have a right to see it. And so I said, if it's really that bad, you probably want to obscure it or change it. I've heard of people who have done something that was too personal, but they didn't want to cover it up. So they put the pages together and then stitched around the outside edge of the paper. And so that way, like right now, this is too personal, too painful. However, in the future, I might want to come back to this, and I can always take and rip out the stitches and reveal that pain again, that wound, and kind of come back to it later. So there are always techniques, or folding it up, putting it inside of an envelope, and it's like, what's in there, but no one else knows what's in there. So there's ways of maybe incorporating things or obscuring things that can't be seen. So anyway, all right. So any other questions? I mean, it's already been 45 minutes. I can talk forever about this type of stuff, but I know we all have things that we need to do. It's not like we're all on vacation, but let me just look over, make sure that I did not miss anybody's question. I see a lot of teachers agreeing with some of the stuff that I was describing. Okay. So, yeah, I think that kind of wraps it up then. So if you do have any other questions, pop them into the comments, and I can always respond to them through the comments. But thank you so much for tuning in. It was a really good conversation. Don't forget, I'm going to do another live stream journaling session this Wednesday morning, 10 a.m. It's going to be about drawing, but not necessarily like super realistic representational drawing, but some other tactics for including drawing in the journal. And then also Wednesday afternoon at 1 p.m. Eastern Daylight Time, I'm going to be doing a Zoom meeting. It's a virtual meetup. So if you want to be part of that, you need to direct message me, or if you have my email, you can email me, and I will send you an invitation. So if you're not aware, Zoom is a very easy to use kind of virtual meeting place, but the problem is that there have been what they are calling Zoom bombers have been infiltrating these Zoom meetings and doing really bad stuff. So anyway, we don't want any of that. So I'm directly inviting people. So if you want to be part of it, like I said, send me a direct message, and I'll send you an invite, or you can email me. And the idea is that we're just going to come together, and I'm not going to share like any tips or techniques. Well, I mean, we'll have a conversation, we'll talk, we'll chat. It'll be very kind of informal. So it will just be, it'll just basically be like us getting together in a studio, making art together, and talking and stuff. So that's the whole idea. And I have the free version, so it's only going to be 40 minutes. And right now I have like 25 people that are planning on showing up. So if you want to be, like I said, make sure you send me send me an email or a direct message. So anyway, thanks so much, and really appreciate you hanging out with me. This has been kind of interesting to sit here and talk to people that I can't see and talk into the microphone and the camera. So appreciate it. So anyway, I'm going to end this now. Have a great day, and as always, happy creating.